It's the real news. I'm Aaron Mate. With his tweets and statements about bombing North Korea, President Trump has set off global panic over nuclear war. Well, now his brand new nuclear strategy raises the alarm even more. A draft of Trump's forthcoming nuclear posture review calls for upgrading the nuclear arsenal to confront Russia and China. And for the first time, it would permit the use of nuclear weapons even in response to a non military attack, like the cyber hacking of U.S. infrastructure. Rick Wayman is Director of Programs and Operations at the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. Rick, welcome. I want to start with a quote from this forthcoming nuclear posture review. Hasn't been put out yet, but there has been a draft leak. Okay, and this is what it says. The U.S. would only consider the use of nuclear weapons in extreme circumstances to defend the vital interests of the U.S., its allies, and partners. Extreme circumstances could include significant non-nuclear strategic attacks. Significant non-nuclear strategic attacks include, but are not limited to, attacks on the U.S., allied or partner civilian population or infrastructure. So, Rick, explain that for us. How unprecedented is this for the U.S. to say that non-nuclear attacks, even non-military attacks, could be grounds for the U.S. use of nuclear weapons?
Well, thanks for having me, Aaron. This is a really disturbing development in U.S. nuclear posture. Over the decades, our posture has been very aggressive, but it hasn't quite gone this far in defining what exactly we would consider as deserving of first use of nuclear weapons. And the language in the Obama nuclear posture review back in 2010 talked about defending the vital interests of the United States and allies, but it didn't go into that level of detail as to what those vital interests might be. And most disturbingly, talking about non-nuclear attacks deserving a nuclear first use by us. So it's definitely many steps in the wrong direction that we're taking here with this draft Trump nuclear posture review. Not the direction that we need to be going. There are enough dangers that we're dealing with in everyday life without being this explicit and threatening others in such a real way.
Right, Rick. So you mentioned Obama's previous nuclear strategy, and this is where it's important to not pin everything on Trump here. It's not just Trump who is advancing this policy. Trump is calling for continuing the Obama policy of spending more than $1 trillion to, quote, upgrade the nuclear arsenal. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's right. The current price tag on that is around $1.25 trillion over the next 30 years. With the Trump nuclear posture review, that price tag is likely to rise because there are some new proposals and possible new programs in there. That's about $80,000 a minute on nuclear weapons and their delivery systems for 30 years. That's a really mind-boggling figure. But yeah, this plan was begun under Obama. Part of it was a compromise with Senate Republicans to get the New START treaty ratified back in 2009, 2010. But the Obama plan goes far beyond what they were talking about during the New START negotiations. We're talking about replacing the warheads and all of the components. We're talking about rebuilding the production infrastructure in New Mexico, California, Tennessee, and other parts of the country. We're talking about new submarines, new airplanes, new land-based missiles to deliver nuclear weapons. And we're also talking about a new command and control system. All of these things are hugely expensive. Their price tag right now is $1.25 trillion. The military and their contractors are not known for being on budget. So this is going to cost us a lot more. And the last thing I want to say about that is the price tag is one thing. There are a lot of human needs. We all know people in this country and around the world need a lot of things: infrastructure, healthcare, food, etc. But cost is only one issue. The real issue here is that these weapons threaten all of us, and that's really what it comes down to, and really why it's so unacceptable.
And can you talk about, because of the way the nuclear arsenal is developed and maintained, the sort of very, very short time constraints it puts on the president and the military in terms of how much time it gives them to decide on whether or not to use weapons? It's something like down to 6 minutes or so now, if they feel as if they need to launch a strike to counter, say, a missile from Russia.
Yeah, so this has gotten a lot of renewed attention lately, both because of the false alarm text message that went out in Hawaii over last weekend, as well as there's a lot of concern about whether our current president is capable of making rational decisions around the use of nuclear weapons. But yeah, this is the case right now. Our posture, our strategy, is to launch on warning. So if our radars and our early warning systems detect an incoming missile or missiles from Russia, from China, from really any nuclear armed adversary, our posture is to launch particularly our land-based missiles prior to the incoming weapons detonating on our soil. So the president only these weapons. They take anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes from launch to detonation. So the president would have a very short amount of time, 6 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes in a best case scenario, really, to make a decision about whether to launch our nuclear warheads on this warning, which could be real. It could be a false warning. The key is, once the decision is made for us to launch our land-based missiles, you can't call them back. So if you launch them and then you realize that it was a false alarm, it's too late. Those missiles are going to their targets and they're going to detonate. So there's a real danger here, not only of nuclear weapons being used on purpose, but also on accident because of a false alarm, because of a technical glitch or a human error.
So, Rick, finally, you were very involved in the process that led to the passage in July at the UN of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The ratification process is underway. The U.S. is opposed to it. Russia has just confirmed it will not be joining. But meanwhile, it is proceeding in the background with dozens of countries signing on. Can you talk about where it is at today and what impact it could have on the efforts to ultimately reduce and hopefully ban nuclear weapons?
Well, like you said, the ratification process is underway. Over 50 countries have already signed on, and many of them are in the process of ratifying it within their own parliamentary structure. So we expect, as 2018 goes on, more and more countries are going to be lodging their official ratification at the United Nations. We need 50 countries to ratify this treaty in order for it to officially enter into force. But it is already having an effect. And one really important effect, in my opinion, is that there are a couple of very large pension funds, one in Norway, one in the Netherlands, that very recently, because of the ban treaty and how it explicitly makes nuclear weapons illegal, these pension funds have decided to divest from companies that produce nuclear weapons. So these are pension funds that control hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're pulling out. They recognize that the international community has said a resounding no to nuclear weapons, and they don't want to be involved in funding the further production. So it's a really positive step. Just a few months ago, I believe it was September 2017, Amalgamated Bank, which is based here in the U.S., was the first U.S. bank to declare a policy of divesting from nuclear weapon producers. So there is some momentum in the financial sector around this, and I think that's one really important way that we can all have an effect. Many of us have a bank account or perhaps some investments somewhere. I think it's really important to find out where those companies are investing their money, if they're investing in nuclear weapons producers, and putting pressure on them to get out of it. It's something that we all can do, and when the money comes out of it, it suddenly becomes not such an attractive thing for companies to be involved in. So a great resource for that is a website called Don't Bank on the Bomb. There they have listed all of the financial institutions that are involved in investing in nuclear weapons production. So I encourage all your viewers to check that out and put some pressure on their banks.
We'll leave it there. Rick Wayman of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Aaron.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.